I said, you're going
there were a couple of construction workers on the third floor, and they were painting whatever. I couldn't see what there was one guy on the second floor. The guy had to go out the hall and check the doors. And see him as third floor setting up the action.
Yeah, they got most of the stuff on the
Four-wheel drives aren't the king of off-road. Trucks aren't the king of off-road.
I walked into those bathrooms, sure enough, there's plastic on your urinals, over these things.
Made him mad, he don't want to see me for a year. Yeah. There's one leak struck his wall somewhere. They took all kinds of pictures and everything. I thought he told you.
You can't tell which elevator you're kind of just have to wait. See which one opens. But that's how it is.
But anyway.
Yeah, well, he said it's not bad.
I'm sure they'll probably ice or something.
Oh, by the way, that slides, here that slides. You can just do it.
What happened?
She said, like, they're gonna get rid
Oh, yeah. They had me, where am I sitting? Where am I sitting? Sitting there, so the construction workers were coming.
No entry.
Good morning. They had to make sure nobody walked in. They were refurbishing.
Yeah, there's a couple of builds out They didn't build one.
What's this I hear that you had surgery? What surgery?
Oh, I had one.
Is it?
It's good.
You had your second.
He's got a thing to go.
Good.
It's good. The other,
She had it.
I'm wearing a wooden shoe on the one that initially had the surgery. I had this, you're older. And so, and it's, like this, so it was about this thick.
It works. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you this morning to our small group study on faith in the power of God. I guess the weather, the cold. Of course, it was a lot of good moisture. When this melts on the lawn, we'll get a lot of moisture on our lawns here. All right, my name is Werner Krutzler. I'm teaching the class this month of February. We've been studying a series on faith that pleases God. And this morning, faith in the power of God is what we're doing. Let me turn this on. Is it on? There, now it's on. All right, so a little bit, this is the third month, so a little bit of a review of December we did profiles in faith. We looked at some people and their faith, looked sort of the line going toward the Messiah. And we talked about Ruth, David's great-grandmother, and then of course David. Jesus was often called the son of David. And then something kind of different, I looked at the family of faith, which was the genealogy of Jesus going from Matthew to Jesus in the book of Matthew, Matthew 1 through 17. Then the faith of the mother of Jesus, Mary, and Elizabeth, her relative, who was the mother then of John the Baptist. And then the faith of Magi, who came from the east to worship the King of the Jews and to bring gifts. And then January, Gordon taught the month of January, learning about faith, and talked about faith and its relationship to righteousness, trust, encouragement, and transformation. And then this month, February, is faith, the righteous live by faith. So this is it this month. Today, Isaiah chapter 40. Then the next 2 weeks, we'll be going to Daniel for faith in the fiery furnace and faith in times of trouble. Now, those of you who have been here for a while may remember about a year ago we did Daniel and Revelation, but that class didn't cover the fiery furnace, so that would be different. And did cover Daniel in the lion's den, but it was one part of 4 different things in Daniel's life. And then February 25th, the book of Habakkuk. This will be my first time ever to study Habakkuk, and I get to teach it. Wow. So we'll learn about Habakkuk here. Okay, today's lesson set is on Isaiah. He's the first in a group of 5 called the 5 major prophets. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and Daniel. Now, the author of Lamentations is not mentioned, but it's believed to be Jeremiah, weeping for the city of Jerusalem. And it's believed Lamentations was written shortly after 586, when Jerusalem's, the city walls, and the temple were destroyed. And they pretty much go in order here, Isaiah being the earliest, and then Jeremiah, and then going through Ezekiel and Daniel. And of course, Ezekiel and Daniel were both prophets during the exile. Daniel first 605 BC, and then Ezekiel was taken later, about 597 in the second group. It's been called the 5th gospel because of the many prophecies in the book of Isaiah that were fulfilled in the New Testament. And there's several times in the book of Isaiah where you see the term good news, which of course is in the Greek there, God spelled gospel. Here's the kings through which Isaiah did his prophecy, going from Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, and Manasseh. If you see on Ahaz and Hezekiah, I got that little plus sign there. Those are the 2 kings with whom in the book of Isaiah he has personal meetings. He speaks with them personally. And then Manasseh, it's believed traditionally that Isaiah was killed during the time of Manasseh, but it's interesting that nowhere in the book of Isaiah is Manasseh mentioned, even though the latter part of his ministry was during the time of Manasseh. Okay, he was an 8th century prophet. That means the 700s BC, and he foretells that there will be an exile. The southern kingdom will be exiled into Babylon, and then he talks that there will be freedom from a captivity eventually, and then the people will eventually return with their faith to the Lord. He was the son of Amos. He's mentioned 13 times in Scripture, but we don't get any information about him other than Isaiah was his son. And he's mentioned in 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles, and Isaiah. We believe he was well educated. Betsy, there's some handouts there on the back. or for any of you, there's a handout on interesting facts about Isaiah. If you didn't get it, it's on the table in the back there. It's believed he was a well-educated person, and he lived in Jerusalem. It's believed he had ready access to the palace, to the court. We're told several times where the Lord tells him to go speak to the king, and he didn't have far to go. Had a lengthy prophecy of 40. I've seen some sources that says longer than 40 years. He was married to a prophetess and had 2 sons. If you remember when we studied Hosea, Hosea was told to marry a woman of harlotry, and he had 3 sons, and God told him the name of all the 3 sons. In this case, Isaiah and his prophetess had 2 sons, and God told them what they should name those sons. One was Shear-Jashub, and that means a remnant shall return. Now these sons were dealing with the king Ahaz. We know at this time that the northern kingdoms, Ephraim and Syria, they were joining together. They made a pact, and they were going to invade Judah and take them into captivity. But Isaiah told him to take your son, Shear-Jashub, and tell Ahaz it's not going to happen. And the meaning of his son, Shear-Jashub, means a remnant shall return, indicating that when they come down and try to take over Judah, they're not going to be successful, and they're going to be pretty much defeated, and only a remnant shall return. And then the second son, Maher-Shalal-Shash-Baz, that's an interesting name. That's actually, trivia, that's actually the longest word in the Bible, is this person's name. Quickly the plunder. Ahaz has a hard time being convinced that the Lord is going to save them from this northern attack. Generally what they'll do is, rather than having faith in the Lord, they'll try to get somebody else on their side, like Egypt, rather than depending on the Lord. But Shear-Jashub, quickly the plunder, that refers to these 2 kingdoms that were going to attack Judah. Rather, they get attacked by Assyria, and then they get taken into captivity, and that quickly the plunder refers to them being attacked. Now, there is a third son, not a son of Isaiah and the prophetess, but that third son comes between Isaiah 7:3 and Isaiah 3:1. And it's a name we're very familiar with. He's mentioned by name 22 times in the New Testament. And Isaiah's Hebrew name means salvation of the Lord. One interesting fact that's not on here is that Isaiah is not his given name. Isaiah is an anglicized form of the Greek of the Hebrew. So what is his Hebrew name? Yeshayahu is his name. Means Yahweh is salvation. This Isaiah means Yahweh is salvation. Well, I don't know what Isaiah means, but his Hebrew name means Yahweh's salvation, and it's found in the Hebrew text in 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles, and Isaiah. So how do we get Isaiah? Well, it's a 3 or 4 step process. You may remember in the 3rd century BC, we have a Greek version of the Hebrew scriptures. And they translated Yeshayahu as Esaias. It's in the Greek, and if you read the New Testament in the Greek, that's what you have for Isaiah. And then that's his name in the New Testament in the King James, only in the King James. And then we come to Isaiah, and in our modern times, American Standard, which is around 1900, and later his name becomes Isaiah. But so the interesting part is, if you look there, if you still use the King James Version, if you go to the Old Testament, his name is Isaiah. But if you look at him in the New Testament, it's Esaias. So that's kind of interesting about the King James. It's the only one that does that. Any of you heard of the Complete Jewish Bible? That's the only Bible I could find which actually has his Jewish name. And I have it digitally. It's not a Bible you want to read, but it's an interesting Bible because it completes. It has all the original Jewish names and Jewish concepts for it, for the cities and everything. Like the law is called mitzvah. So there is his name there, Yeshayahu, son of Amoz. And you see there Judah and Jerusalem. And you see the purple there at the bottom? That's Hezekiah. Hezekiah. Oh, okay. We know the story about his death, when you read Hebrews 11, about some being sawed in two, the prophets. And that's tradition, Talmudic. And there's also a work called The Martyrdom and Ascension of Isaiah, and it's in there, about his death, that he was killed by Manasseh. But Manasseh, as I said, is not mentioned in the book of Isaiah. And that he was sawn in two while inside of a cedar tree or log. It didn't take much to rile Isaiah or King Manasseh. If you see the two passages there from 2 Kings, shed very much blood till he filled Jerusalem from one end to the other with blood. And then even Josephus talks about him, he said he filled the city with blood. But if you look some of these passages, they didn't like what Isaiah was teaching. He said that he had seen God. And no one can see God. Remember Isaiah chapter 6 where he saw the Lord and all that. He said he had seen God. He said Jerusalem's going to be invaded. They're going to be taken into exile. They're going to destroy the temple. He didn't care for that. That's not good. So these passages, this martyrdom and ascension, talks about this cedar tree. Either he crawled into a cedar log, or one mentions that this tree enveloped him. He was inside, it was protecting him. So Hezekiah then gave the order to cut down the tree with him inside of it. Our typical exposure to Isaiah. Isaiah is 66 chapters. Very long. I think it's maybe the third longest in terms of words in the Old Testament. But typically we're three different ways. Isaiah 53, we all know that one, right? Suffering servant, believed to be a messianic prophecy. And sometimes someone's doing the Lord's Supper and they'll read a passage from Isaiah 53. Of course, Isaiah 7:14, around Christmas time, December, talks about Emmanuel. And then Isaiah 6:1 through 13, here am I, send me. We may be talking about, Moses, how Moses didn't want to be a prophet. Jeremiah said, I'm too young. Of course, Jonah said, I can't go to Nineveh. I got reservations on the cruise to Spain, right? So he couldn't go. But these are the normal things. There's another one I didn't put on here. Isaiah 9, for unto us a son is born. That's another typical one. So it's interesting, looking at Isaiah. Does anyone have like a lesson on Isaiah? And we've been doing, Bible Talk TV, Mike Mazzalongo, he does have one, Isaiah for Beginners, 9 lessons. Just 9 lessons. There's an intro, structures and features, 3 lessons on that. And then there's woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Isaiah 6 we talked about. And then Isaiah 58, true and false fasting. So there's not that much. I don't think anyone wants to do 66 chapters, 1 verse at a time. But this one is interesting here. Isaiah 7:14. Why only 1 verse? That verse has a context, doesn't it? But we never go back and look at that context. And it talks about that second son. Ahaz still has a problem, doesn't believe God that he's going to protect them. So, Isaiah comes to Ahaz again. This is verse 10 of Isaiah chapter 7. Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, ask a sign of the Lord your God. Let it be deep as Sheol and high as heaven. So ask anything of the Lord for a sign so I can finally convince you that you're not going to be taken into captivity right now. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, and I will not put the Lord to the test. And he said, hear then, O house of Israel, is it too little for you to weary men, that you weary my God also? This is Isaiah talking to Ahaz. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign that this is not going to happen. You're not going to be taken into captivity. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. There's the verse. Then he tells us about this son, his diet. He shall eat curds and honey when he knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the boy knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land whose two kings you dread, the king of Syria and the king of Ephraim, that this land will be deserted before this boy knows how to choose good and evil. So Ahaz says, well, good. When is this son going to be born? Oh, 700 years from now. It's like saying, are you concerned about the high prices at the grocery store? Don't worry, they're going to come down in 50 years. But, were there two Emmanuels? Were there two? We have places where passages get filled twice. Out of Egypt I called my son. Well, God called his son Israel out of Egypt, and God called his son Jesus out of Egypt. So two fulfillings. But that's interesting, just looking at the Emmanuel passage in context. Here's the Isaiah structure I mentioned in Mike Mazzalongo's class. Well, I didn't get this from his class, but this is an interesting structure here. Goes through the first 39 verses, which is sometimes considered Isaiah 1. These happened during his lifetime. But then if we move on, goes A through F. Then if we look at lowercase e, comfort for God's people who trust him, and then go up to E, woes on people who do not trust him. God as creator, D, in 43 to 45, God as conqueror. Judgment focused on Babylon, judgment on the nations including Babylon. Promise of a suffering servant Messiah goes along with promise of a divine royal Messiah. And then the last one here, we have at the top, judgment and restoration for God's people. Restoration for God's people. And at the end, restoration for God's people, including foreigners. Gentiles will be included in the good news of salvation. Now here are the three divisions of the book of Isaiah. 1 through 39, events during Isaiah's lifetime, 739 to 701. And then you notice the second two, 40 to 55, that's 605, that's when Jerusalem is conquered by Nebuchadnezzar and they're taken into exile. And then there's the return from exile. So the issue here is they say, well, Isaiah didn't live this long. He could not have written 40 to 55, 56 through 66. Because that involves believing in predictive prophecy. And in that second period, Isaiah mentions Cyrus, who by name, who hasn't even been born. That is amazing. Remember Daniel about the figure with the dream he has? He talks about the kingdoms. Can you imagine if Daniel would have actually mentioned Alexander and Julius Caesar by name? He doesn't do that, but those are there. But Isaiah gets so specific as to name the man. Isaiah in the New Testament, after Psalms, it's the most quoted book, Old Testament book in the New Testament. 412 quotations, citations, allusions altogether in the New Testament. So that's quite a few. The New Testament attributes all three sections to Isaiah, saying that they are from Isaiah. Jesus used Isaiah 20, those passages there. When John the Baptist was in prison, he sends his followers to say, Jesus, are you the one, or shall we look for another? His passages to send back to John were from Isaiah. And remember Jesus in the temple? Jesus in the synagogue in Nazareth? And then a scroll was handed to him, the scroll of the prophet Isaiah, and that was Isaiah 61. So Isaiah 61, that last part was attributed to Isaiah. Paul used Isaiah 11:10 to show that God always intended to include the Gentiles in the plan of salvation, and that's in Romans 15:12. And in much of the imagery in Revelation, talking about the New Jerusalem, the new temple, and that comes from Isaiah also. So quite a bit comes from Isaiah. What would you think would be the New Testament book that contains the most from Isaiah? So just think, and then I'll give you the answer. It's not even close. Look what it is. Revelation. 21 of 26 New Testament books have quotations, allusions, or citations from Isaiah. 21 of 26. Okay. So Isaiah 39 ends with a prophecy to King Hezekiah, warning him of this upcoming exile. He says that King Hezekiah had hosted some emissaries from Babylon, because remember Hezekiah was sick and he was going to die, and then he prayed and then the Lord gave him some additional years. So they sent some emissaries to Hezekiah, and then he showed him all the wealth. And then Isaiah says, well, you shouldn't have done that because all this is now, it's going to be taken away. And then Isaiah 40 begins with encouraging words. So we get the discouraging words in Isaiah 39 that you're going to be taken into exile. And then Isaiah 40 is that second part of Isaiah where they get encouraging words that the exile is coming to an end. Isaiah uses poetic and parallel structure, poetic structure. You know how to tell if language in the Bible is poetic? If you want to get out one of these, and if you go to Isaiah 39 and Isaiah 40, page 599, and if you look at Isaiah 39 and you look at the left, if you look at the left column, the left margin, you see how it comes straight down. And then you go over to Isaiah 40 and you see all the indentations. That is poetic language. Straight, go over to 598, you have some straight, and then you have some indentation. So that's how you can tell if it's poetic or just narrative. And if you look at Psalms, the entire thing is arranged as poetic language. Many years had passed from that prophecy there in Isaiah 39, over 100 years, until the fulfillment of these passages there. And it would be about 700 years for the fulfillment of one of the passages we're going to look at in Isaiah 40. So here's that comfort. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that her warfare is ended and that her iniquity is pardoned and that she has received from the Lord's hand double for her sins. So we have the comfort, comfort, mentioned twice to emphasize it. And this is actually imperative voice in the Hebrew here. And it lets them know two things. Even though you're in exile, you're far away. This could be written both to the people in exile. It's specifically addressed there in verse 2 to Jerusalem, but you're still my people. I haven't abandoned you, even though you're living far away. And second thing, I'm still your God. No matter where you are, I'm still your God. If I send you to Nineveh, I'm still your God. So speak tenderly, speak to the heart, speak from the heart to Jerusalem, and cry to her that her warfare is ended and her iniquity is pardoned. That warfare that Jerusalem has gone through, from the Babylonians coming, destroying the walls, destroying the temple, that's ended. She has received from the Lord's hand double for her sins. Double for her sins. That was predicted, that she would receive double for her sins. That's found in Jeremiah. But first I will doubly repay their iniquity and their sin, because they have. Why did they doubly have to repay? Because of what they did. They polluted my land with carcasses and their detestable idols, and they have filled my inheritance with their abominations. And we learn from other areas that they were not keeping the Sabbath on the land, letting the land rest every 7 years. They weren't doing that. But what do you think? Was God too severe on his people? Destroying the temple. We read that when they were taken into exile, it's divided into threes. A third goes into exile, a third runs away, and then a third gets killed. So a lot of things happen. But we're going to read from Ezra. Of course, Ezra is after the exile. Cyrus has issued his edict. They get to go home. Ezra gets to go back along with Zerubbabel. And this is what he had to say about what God did to them. Ezra 9:13a. And after all that has come upon us for our evil deeds and for our great guilt, seeing that you, our God, have punished us less than our iniquities deserve. So this is after the fact. Ezra admitted, we could have been punished more for our iniquities than what you did. God was merciful. So this should be a very familiar passage. A voice cries, in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Does that sound familiar? What about the placement of the colon? Where's the voice and where's the Lord? Isn't the Lord in the wilderness? A voice cries, colon, in the wilderness prepare the way of the Lord, make straight. In the desert a highway for our God. Whose voice? Here it is in the NASB. A voice is calling, clear the way for the Lord in the wilderness. Make smooth in the desert highway for our God. We're thinking, wait a minute. The voice, that's John. He's in the wilderness, not the Lord. Now, this is one Isaiah passage which is found in all four Gospels. That's unusual to be in all four Gospels. Here it is in Matthew 3. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. For this is he who was saying by the prophet Isaiah when he said, the voice of one crying in the wilderness. So the person doing the crying is in the wilderness. Prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight. We don't know where the Lord is. And then the same thing in Mark, and the same thing in Luke, in the wilderness. Now, this might be that way because we mentioned the Septuagint. The New Testament writers, maybe to make things easy for themselves, and because it was reliable, they were writing in Greek. So if you're quoting from a source, Would it be easier to quote from a Hebrew source and you have to translate it, or quote from a reliable Greek source? So if your New Testament quote does not align up perfectly with the Old Testament quote, it's because the New Testament writers were using the Septuagint. If you look at the English translation of the Septuagint, it lines up pretty much exactly. The voice of one calling in the desert, prepare the way of the Lord, make the paths of our Lord God straight. Now, this could also be changed, right? There's no punctuation in the Greek. You could have the same sentence, the voice of one calling, comma, then quote, in the desert, prepare the way of the Lord. You've seen those where you can change a sentence, same word, same order, just by punctuation, you can change the meaning of the sentence. And John's is a little bit different. And this is, so I'm going to read this one. And this is the testimony of John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him. This is John the Baptist, not John the Apostle. Who are you? He confessed and did not deny, but confessed, I am not the Christ. And they asked, who then? Who are you? Are you Elijah? He said, I am not. Are you the prophet? He answered, no. This sort of sounds like what Jesus asked in Matthew chapter 16. Who do people say that, the Son of Man is? So they said to him, the people that were sent to ask who he was, who are you? We need to give an answer to those who sent us back in Jerusalem, high priests, people back there. What do you say about yourself? And he said, I am the voice of one calling out in the wilderness. Make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah said. So according to this, it would be about 700 years before that prophecy in Isaiah 40 verse 3 was fulfilled. Does that look like a straight road? That makes Kansas look good, doesn't it? This road is 140 miles long, perfectly straight. If you had one of those self-driving cars, you could use that and not worry. It's in Saudi Arabia, and it goes to an oil field. So that's what's out there. Now, it was the custom for centuries of Eastern monarchs who were traveling throughout their domain to send men before them to prepare their way by removing stones, leveling rough places, filling up hollows, cleaning up trash and litter, generally making the road pleasant and easy for the distinguished travelers and their guests. And I wonder if they set out orange barrels while they were doing this. One of the stories told about the semi-legendary Queen Sammu Rammat, who reigned from 810 to 783. When she went on one of her journeys, she came to a rough mountainous region and ordered that the hills be leveled and the hollows filled, which was done at an enormous cost. Her object was not only to shorten her way, but to leave to posterity a lasting monument to herself. Now here's another passage in Isaiah about making roads smooth. He says, go through the gates, prepare the way of the people, build up the highway, clear it of its stones, and lift up a signal over the peoples. So, making roads smooth. And then verse 4 sounds sort of like what I just read. Every valley shall be lifted up, every mountain hill be made low, uneven ground shall become leveled, and the rough places a plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, from the mouth of the Lord has spoken. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Word of the Lord stands forever. Another voice says, cry. Now we don't have John the Baptist saying this. And I said, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, all beauty is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades. When the breath of the Lord blows on it, surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our Lord stand forever. Now, reading Isaiah chapter 40, got me to thinking about something. We think of 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, Hebrews 11, faith chapter. I call Isaiah 40 the nature chapter. We have dust, we have sand, we have earth, we have flowers, we have grass, we have the planet Earth, we have constellations. So we go from dust to constellations. We have an eagle in this chapter. Everything. The greatness of God. Now I talked about poetic language having parallelism, and we really see it here. The greatness of God. Go up to a high mountain. O Zion, herald of good news, lift up your voice in strength. O Jerusalem, herald of good news, lift it up. You see the parallelism there? Zion, herald of good news. Jerusalem, herald of good news. And aren't Zion and Jerusalem the same thing? Two ways of saying the same thing. Behold your God. Behold, the God comes with might. Our subject today is the power of God. We'll see this in several passages here in Isaiah 40. Behold, the Lord comes with might, and his arm rules for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his recompense before him. He will tend his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arms, and he will carry them in a bosom, and gently lead those who are with young. Doesn't that remind you of Jesus? Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I would want to gather you together like a hen gathers her chicks. So this has sort of messianic overtones here with that verse 11. Okay, God's immensity, his power, and his knowledge. God has power. But does that do any good if he doesn't use it for his people? We see parallelism here. And we have some questions here, maybe rhetorical questions. Who has done this? Who has done this? Well, of course, no human being has done this, only God, who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand. How many scoops of water would it take you, for the Pacific Ocean? How many scoops of water just for your bathtub? But God can do it. He marked off the heavens with a span and closed the dust of the earth. The measure weighed down the mountains, weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in balance. We see our parallelism here. Measured, marked off, enclosed, weighed, hollow of the hand, span, measure. Some have baskets, scales, balance. Who has measured the Spirit of the Lord? Or what man shows him his counsel? Whom did he consult, and who made him understand? Looking up at the sky. God has measured the heavens with a span. You know what a span is? Remember Goliath, 6 cubits in a span? That's a span. Can you imagine how many of these does it take to measure the universe? We measured it in light years and parsecs. Looking up there, sees the same things people did thousands of years ago. We see the Milky Way galaxy there. Wonder, what did people living in Isaiah's time think of the Milky Way galaxy? Mountains in a bowl. Who taught God the path of justice? Who taught him? Who taught him knowledge? Who showed him the way of understanding? Behold, the nations are like a drop in the bucket. Nations, a drop. And are counted as dust on the scales. How much would dust impact the weight of something you're measuring? That's what the nations are. Behold, he takes up the coastlands like fine dust. Lebanon, the cedars of Lebanon. Think of all the wood you get there. They would not suffice for fuel, nor are its beasts enough for a burnt offering. I found an interesting saying here. What do you think about this? Has it ever occurred to you that nothing has ever occurred to God? God never says, it just occurred to me. God has never learned anything, and he never will. What is wrong with him? So no human being can teach God a single thing. Is God any smarter today than he was on the sixth day of creation? Did he talk to his heavenly host? And he says, can you believe what Adam and Eve did? I give them one thing, don't eat from that tree. And what do? He said, well, I'll never make that mistake again. No, God didn't. I think God knew that. But nothing has ever occurred to God. Never gets surprised.
What about Abram, though? Think
What?
about God listened to Abram. Abraham got God to change his mind. Like God was going to destroy some things, and Abraham prayed to him. So, I mean...
Yep. You can influence God.
Yeah.
God did ask for advice once, right? When Ahab is going to get killed, and God is with his heavenly hosts. And he says, how can we convince Ahab to go out and fight this battle so that he's going to die? And then a spirit sets forth, I got it. I'll be a lying spirit in the mouths of his prophets. And God said, you will succeed. Go and do it. It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. Inhabitants like grasshoppers. Isn't that what the 10 spies said? We're like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in, who brings princes to nothing and makes the rulers of the earth. So we talked about God over nature. God's intelligent, and now his power. His power compared to the power of people in positions of authority. Talks about sits above the circle of the earth. The circle of the earth. Now looking at passages on that, I couldn't find any that says, well, God, Isaiah here is mentioning, well, the earth is round here, the sphere. They're mostly mentioning, they mention if you look, ground is flatter out on the sea, you can see that the horizon sort of curves. To whom then shall you compare me? The incomparable God, that I should be like him, says the Holy Lord. Lift up your eyes on high and see who created these. This is the stars. He who brings out their heavenly host and calling them by name. God has names for all the stars. By the greatness of his might, it is because he is strong in power, not one of them is missing. Here talks about all the stars of the heavens, and their constellations will give light. What I think is really Job. Job is about the time of Abraham. Look what we got there. Who made the bear? What's the bear? Big Dipper, Ursa Major, Orion, the most prominent constellation, and the Pleiades. The star cluster there are the Pleiades. Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel? Almost done here. My way is hidden from the Lord. My right is disregarded by my God. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. Again, the power of the God. He gives power to the faint. He increases strength. So not only God has power, but he gives power. He gives power. Like Jesus gave power. He gave power and authority to his apostles. And then last verse. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up like wings, with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. Remember when we were doing youth forums? This was one of the themes. Okay, next week, faith in the fiery furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Very interesting.